So, hey everyone, welcome. So, today I'll be talking about data flows in Dataflex Pro, about how you can sync your data from your external sources and club that into Dataflex Pro and use that into your Power Apps applications. So, a little bit about myself before starting. I am a Microsoft certified trainer and work as a cloud specialist at Applied Info Services India Private Limited. I am also the UG leader for Hyderabad Power Apps and Power Automate user group. So if you want to join the group and if you have any questions or any concerns, you can reach out to me and we can talk about that. You can also connect to me on Twitter and my email address. So the both are mentioned here on the screen. If you're facing any issues again, you can reach out to me. And the last one is my personal blog where I write about the learnings I have on the Power platform and if there are any issues I'm getting in, what are the steps I follow to debug those. So all is that like documented there. So you can check out my blog as well. Now let's talk about the objective of this session, like what we are going to do and cover in this next 1 hour. First, we'll talk about what are data flows and why is it needed in our Power Platform applications, what is the significance of it, and then we'll see how you can get started with building your first data flow. And then we'll also take a look at how you can perform some data transformation on the data that you are getting from your third party data source. So we'll check all kinds of operation that are available, and we'll also try to manipulate the data in a way where we are adding certain new columns and matching the data with the schema that we have in our entities. So let's get started. Let's first talk about what is a data flow. So a data flow is a medium which we can use to sync data between our source and sink. And this way it works like whatever data I have in my, let's say, an example would be a SharePoint list, or if you have an SQL server. In that case, let's consider you have a SharePoint list and you want to store all the details you have in that SharePoint list to an entity in Dataflex Pro. The thing is, you still want to keep your SharePoint list data because it's being utilized in any of your other applications, and that data is critical. So SharePoint is a must, and you want to maintain the same copy into a Dataflex Pro entities. So this is where you can create a data flow to create that sync between the two. This is a unidirectional communication which will be created. So if you are adding something to SharePoint list, it will be copied back to your Dataflex Pro entities. But the sync from Dataflex Pro to SharePoint, it's not supported. So it is like unidirectional. Whatever you have in the third-party data sources, it will be copied or it will be synced to your Dataflex Pro entity. Then, while you start building your data flow, there are a number of available connectors that you can use. So you can use SQL servers, you can use SharePoint list, you can use Excel files. So there are like a number of connectors that are available, and we'll be taking a look at them in a few minutes. And then you can also set the sync up frequency, which means how frequent my data is going to refresh, or how many times a day I want my data flow to run and sync the data between these two data sources. So this is where we can set this sync up frequency. This frequency can be manual or it can run on a schedule. So in manual, we'll have to manually go in and click that refresh button, and then my data will be refreshed. But with the scheduler, we can set up time, something like I want to refresh my data every 5 hours or maybe every 5 minutes. So that kind of frequency we can set it up there. Then while the synchronization is getting done, the backup is taken in the form of incremental backup. So if there are any rows in the data that exist already, and we are, we have a unique identifier, and if we are posting some new data on top of it, then it will consider only the rows which are part of incremental data. So in that way, if there is a new row in the record, it will be created as a new record. But if let's say there are any updates in the previous data, then those will also be updated and the rest of the columns will remain same. So in this demo today, we'll take a look at this data model and how we are, trying to sync data between my SharePoint online list and Then I am trying to sync this data with a Dataflex Pro entity. So here, let me explain this model to you first. In SharePoint Online, I have this list called student. So in this list, there are like 5 columns, which are like student name, class, year, subject, and marks obtained. When I'm uh, syncing this data with Dataflex Pro entities, I have created 2 separate entities. This is because I wanted to keep the student data segregated at one place, and then I wanted to look up for those students in my assessment records entity. So this is something like I am storing students at one place, and then I am storing records about their assessments, like their marks, which subject it was for, and which class it was for, and which year it was for. All those details in a separate entity. So then I'm going to like link those 2 entities to segregate my data properly. So in here, I have the SharePoint online list where the student name is a single line of text field. I have reused the title field, so the logical name of the field will remain same. This is something I want to highlight before, because when we are going to select the student name field in the data flow, I am going to select the title field actually. Then this class field, it's a single line of text field in SharePoint Online, and it's again a single line of text field in my entity. For year, the same story. Both are numbers in the respective 2 places. The difference where I am, creating a link between different field types is for the student name and the subject fields. Sorry. So subject field in SharePoint Online is a choice type field where I have like multiple choices, and I can give the user to option to select from these choices like option 1, option 2, option 3, and option 4. While in case of my entity, I have this subject field as an option set. So there the schema will be different. Different. The difference will be for all the options inside a option set, we have a value associated with it, and then there is a unique number that identifies that option. So we'll need to make something, or we'll need to configure something so that this link is, created. And if I am passing a text value from my SharePoint online list, this will automatically be recognized as an option set value. So this is something we are going to do as part of our demo. And the second piece is like here in the SharePoint online list, my student name is a single line of text field. While in my Dataflex Pro entities, it is a separate entity altogether where I have the name of the student and their address. So then the student entity will be a lookup in the assessment records entity. So every assessment record will be looking up to a student of which the details are about. So we are trying to deal with such kind of a scenario. A little bit about like for the lookup field, what we'll need to do is, so since we have 2 different entities here and they are linked via a lookup field, so we'll need to define a key which will identify itself as a unique identifier. And through that, whenever we are building our data flow, we can select this key, and based on that, if even if we pass the text value, it will be recognized as a proper, you can say, lookup record, and it will be associated. Now let's go to the option set field. So in the option set, whenever we are trying to pass the values of option set field from data flow, it wants that value of the option instead of the physical name. It wants the logical value in the backend. So there we'll need to map that option value. I'll show you in my demo how we can do that. So let's go ahead and quickly see what we have in place already and how we are going to progress with it. So in here, I have the SharePoint list for me. This is what we just talked about. It has a student name, it has a year, it has a class, subject, and then the marks obtained by these students. If I notice here, this is a text field, and if I have like 2 students, student B and student B, so they'll be like they are different records here, and I'll have to manually type in the values every time. So now let's go and create the similar entities in the Dataflex Pro. So here I have my list already available, and based on this, I'm going to create a new entity. basically two entities, and then I'll start building my data flow. So let's come here and create a new solution. Let's say data flows. I'll select the publisher as by the devs. This is something I use. Okay, so my solution is now created. Now we want to create a new entity. So this will be something like new entity. And I want to give this entity a name which would be something like student details. And in here, I want the name of the student, and then there will be a field for address. So let's add that as well. I'll keep this as text area and then done. So my entity is getting provisioned in the backend, but I still continued and make the changes, which was for the field. And if I want, I can save this entity now. So in here, if I observe, there are a few fields that are created by default because when I created this entity, I selected this name field and the address field. But to store additional metadata about our records, there are few fields that are created out of the box. So this is what we have here. Now let's go back to the solution and I'll select again new entity. And this time we want to create the entity for this part, this assessment record entity. So this one is done, first part. Now we want to create the entity for second part. So let's name this something like and there will be a name. Okay. So it started again provisioning my entity in the backend. I can go ahead and add my additional fields here. So let's say I want to add class field, which will be text. Okay, so I am adding that. Then I want to add which year it is for. So year, and then it will be a whole number, let's say. Done. Then I will add a field for student. And here I'm going to create a lookup record to my student entity I just created. So in here I'll select the student, not this one, student details. So this is the entity I just created. And then I'll click done. So we have class, year, student. Now I want to create a field for subject. So this will be something like subject, and I want this to be an option set. So I'll scroll down and select this as option set. Now I'll create a new option set. So I'll name this something else like subject options. So in here, I'm going to add a list of subjects like English. Chemistry, and then finally social. Okay, I just saved it. I just want to make sure I have all the values here that are there in this SharePoint list. So yes, we have all these four subjects available because if there is any value for subject that exists in the SharePoint list and it's not there in the options of my subject field in my Dataflex Pro entity, then my sync is going to fail and it will give me a report of like what all records have failed because of this issue. So in here I have this subject field created. I'll mark this as done. So now I have this subject field and the last field we want to create is for marks obtained. So let's say marks obtained. Then this will be a number, whole number field again. Done. So I'll save this entity. So in here, the same number of fields are created by default out of the box. And if I go back to my solution, I can see that I have now two entities here, one for the students and the second for assessment details. And the third one is like the options that we created for subjects. One thing I want to do now is, so for patching the values to an option set field, we'll need the unique identifiers of those options. So let's do that first. So I'll open a notepad so that we can keep those unique values with us. I'll open this data flow, the subject options option set. And in here, I can see that there are the items which I added to this list. If I want, I can select this three dots here and then select view more. So here is the value we are looking for. So English is corresponding to this 962640000 value. So let's note all of these down here. English, this is the value. Let me just minimize the window a little bit. And then for Hindi, and social science. So I have expanded all the subjects here so that we don't have to minimize the window again and again. I'll click here and write the value for Hindi. It is going to be same. There is this difference of one. So the option sets, if we are creating a custom option set, usually what happens is the values are in like sync order. So they are in a sequence. But it's a good practice to check these details again, just in case this value is not in sequence. Then the value is same with values, and then for chemistry it is 4 and social science. So I have just kept all these values, whatever the unique identifiers we have for each option in the notepad. When I'm going to create this data flow, I'll put these value in that flow, and that will be it. So now one more thing for the lookup field we have for students. So in here for the student details entity, as we talked about here in the PPT, for the lookup field, we will need to create a key, which can be used as a unique identifier. So I'll go back here in my student details entity. I'll come to keys and I'll add key here. So let's name this something as my key for data flow. I'll select the name field here. So this is something like the name field in the student details entity will be unique key for identification. I'll click this as done and save. So now my key is created. Let's go and start building our data flow first. So I'll click on this data flows here. I already have a data flow created.
Ritika, just to stop you here, actually your screen is kind of frozen, and maybe it is just for me, but can you move a little slowly? All right, I can see it fine now. I can see it fine now, thanks.
Okay, so I'm switching back to the make.parapps.com screen. So are you able to see it here? Just a confirmation.
Yeah, I'm able to see the student details in make.parapps.com.
Yes, Ritika, it actually stuck in option set.
So maybe
let me reshare it.
Yeah. Just stop sharing and reshare it.
So I have the data flows screen open.
Correct. I can see it now. Yeah.
Okay. Yes. So then in that case, I'll go back and explain what I just did. So in here for this solution data flow, demo data flows, I have created this option set, subject options. and I fetched out all the unique identifiers for these options, or something like view more and then these values. And I have taken a note of these. The second thing I did was for lookup fields, which is on the student details entity. So in here, I have created a unique key for this entity. So something like a unique identifier when we are, trying to save data for lookup field. So this is like my key for data flow, and then the field is name. So now we'll go back to data flow screen, and I'll start creating a new data flow. I'll name this something like demo data flow and start the process. So once this is like done, it will list out all the data sources that are available. So we can see here we have Excel supported, we have folders, JSON, we can get the data in form of a PDF. So these are like the number of data sources that are available, and we can use those to store our data from one place to another or sync that data between the two. In this case, since we have this SharePoint online list here, which has my data, I'm going to select that option, SharePoint online list. And whenever you are doing this for the first time, it will ask you for creating a connection to the SharePoint list. So what you need to do is you need to copy this URL, and then you can paste it in the site URL. Since I already have a connection created, it already recognized it, and I got this connection as on my name. But if you're doing it for the first time, here is what you can do. You can provide a connection name, and then you can select what is the kind of authentication that you'll be doing for creating a connection. So here the options are anonymous and Microsoft account. Since a SharePoint online list is my list, and it's like it is on my Microsoft account, and it is authenticated by that. So I have selected this authentication kind as Microsoft account, and then I signed into my account using this option. And when I did that whole process, a connection for me was created, something like on my user account. And if I select next now, it will fetch me a list of all the available data sources that are there in my SharePoint site, because we have provided the URL of this whole site. And in case you have multiple lists here, they'll all be like populated in this. So the name of our SharePoint list is student, so we can select that. And I can see that it has now details about the data I have in my SharePoint list. So if I take a look here, I have the subjects English, mathematics, physics, and chemistry, and here is the title field for student A, B, and C. Now I'll click on transform data. So this is where if we want to add some additional columns or perform any updates on my existing columns, I can do those operations here. So if I want to, let's say, split a column into something, I can select this value. So first I'll need to select that column, and then I can select the option if I want to split that column by a delimiter or by number of characters. So let's say a field has like 10 characters each for each record, and I want to place first 5 characters into one column and second the last 5 characters into a second column. I can do all those kind of transformations here by this option. For our demo purposes, we are going to add a new column for storing these unique identifiers we just collected for the option sets. So something like for English, we selected this 96264. So all these value we'll need to add a column here. If you want, the available options are here for transformation. So you can use the first row as headers, and if you want to detect anything out of this data, you can do that. You can split the columns, you can format those, and if you want to perform some scientific calculation or some other kind of operations on the data, so this is where you can do it on the transform tab. For us, we'll go to the add columns section, and in here we have a certain kind of columns like custom column, duplicate column, index column, and then conditional column. In this case, we have like all the values and their associated numbers. So we can go ahead with a conditional column. So now this is adding a conditional column for me. let me name this something like subject value. And in here, I have this option of selecting the column which I want to, apply a condition on. In this case, we want to apply a condition on subject, so I can select that value. Then we have a number of operators here, so like equals or doesn't equals. So in here, for value, I have two options. I can either provide a value of my own, or I can refer to a value in a different column. So if I select this use values in a column option, I can see the other columns that are available in this list, and based on those, I can also, add this criteria. So let's say if I want column A and column B to be equal, then I want to say yes, and if they are not equal, then no. So this is where we can, use this use values in a column option. Now let's see for the value here. If I say, let's say if the subject is English, then I want the output to be this one. 962. I can give this value here. Then for adding an else if condition, we can add a clause here. So we'll need to add the same for all the subjects that are available here. In case you have an option set with more values, you can list out all those values here and pass this in the conditional column likewise. So in here, if I'll select subject again, then I'll say the, and then the value will be 1. For the same I need to do for all the columns. So if it is mathematics, the value will be 2. So in here we have these values in sequential order. So that's why I'm just blindly, copying the same value and just replacing the last character. But if your values differ, so make sure you're, passing the right value. Otherwise, your data will not be proper. Then in here for subjects, I have this, and the subject will be physics, chemistry. And in here we have our last value. And in here I'm leaving this else option as blank because these are the only values I have. But if you want to keep something, if the, let's say the column is blank, or it has any of other options available, then you can also put something for the else value. In here, let's just match. We have all the subjects in the correct order, and yes, they are. So I'm going to click OK. So now it will, what it will do is it will create a new column for me. And if I, go back to this, scroll towards the right side, then I can see that the subjects are English, mathematics, physics, and chemistry. So the order should be something like 0 and then 2 and then 4 and 5, something 3 and 4. Yes. So now I can see this, a new column is created. I gave the column name as subject value. So this is here, and then I have values for each of these items. So when I am, configuring the column in my Dataflex Pro entity, instead of passing this subject column, which is like a simple text field, I can pass these as the unique identifying numbers, and then it will recognize and store my value. So now let's go ahead and click next. So here we have this option of either creating this as part of a new entity, or I can load this into an existing entity. And if I don't want to load it at all, I can do that as well. So since we have the entity already created, assessment details, I can select this option as load to an existing entity. I can select my entity here. It will be something like assessment details. Let me just quickly recheck the entity name. Yes, it is an assessment details. Assessment details we have here, and now as soon as I selected this entity, it has automatically recognized what all fields I have in this second entity. So it's like class, marks obtained, name, and then if you notice a bit here, btd underscore student dot btd underscore name. This is the lookup field. And the reason I'm seeing this .btd underscore name here is because of the key we created. So when we went in here to the entity and added a unique key for this entity, then only I'm able to see this option. If we have not created a key, this option will not show. So in here, I can map my fields from source column to the destination columns now. Class for class, and then marks obtained for marks obtained. We are not going to utilize this name field here, so I can pass anything in this. So let's say I pass the subject text value. This is just a test, and if you have any other condition, so you can add a new column and pass certain value there, or you can directly assign a field. I mean, based on your conditions. For student, we are going to map the student name field we have in this SharePoint list. So this is the title field, so the logical name will still remain title. When I come back to this list, there is no field as student name because the field is title. It works on the logical names. And then for the subject, I can select the newly created column, which will be subject value. And for year, there is this year column we have. So then I can select some configuration like this. If I click next, then it will ask me for the refresh settings I want to put on this data, like how frequent I want this data to be refreshed. So it's like loading, it's saving my details in the backend. Okay, so there is one other option here, delete rows that are not existing in the query. What that means is if there is any row that is in SharePoint that was earlier in SharePoint and it was copied to CD, Dataflex Pro, and if that row no longer exists in SharePoint list, then it will be deleted from my entity. So when I want to select the option for refresh settings, there are two options. One is refresh manually and the other one is refresh automatically. For manually, I'll have to go in again and again and refresh this as per my needs. And for refreshing it automatically, the minimum time I can set is for 1 minute. So here I can select the options for minutes, hours, days, weeks, months. So whatever schedule I want to put this on, I can select those settings here. I can also select the start date and the time. The time and everything will be in UTC. So if you are in a different time zone, you may want to adjust that time by yourself. And once this configuration is done, the data flow will be saved, and based on the refresh settings, my data will start syncing. Here I have selected this refresh manually option just for this demo. So I'll click and this create. When this data flow will run for the first time, I mean, based on the configuration I have in place, it is going to fail. The reason behind that is uh, in my student details entity, I don't have any data. There are no records. And if I take a look at this, so it is expecting student A, student B, and student C in the entity already. And if those records are not found, the data flow will fail. And this is how we once this data flow is triggered, we can check if my flow run is successful, if it has failed. So we can get all kinds of history here. So this is an option for show refresh history. So here I can get the list of all the runs that are triggered for this specific data flow. And this one, because we just created this data flow, the status is in progress and it might take a few seconds for this to complete. We just have 4 rows in my SharePoint list. So the process will be faster compared to when we have more rows in the source data uh, source. So in here, let this process complete first, because then I'll show you how the error log looks like and how you can open it and debug the issue. So in here, if I check this last refresh status, I can see this icon that there was something wrong with my refresh on the data flow. I can click on this show refresh history, and if I download this, and I just opened that file. So it says the error is it couldn't resolve the quit for field btd student dot btd name, and the value for the lookup that is not found is like student a b c, because we do not have the records in place. So one thing worth noticing is like whenever we are creating a data flow, we want to make sure that whatever data this data flow is going to copy, or if there are any entities that are linked through it, the data should be there already. So what we'll do now is we'll go to this student details entity, add a record here. So I am going to add 3 records here: student A, student B, and C. Student is there. Then I'm creating student A, student, and then save. So in here, if I come back on page and I refresh my data, I can see that 3 students are now created. And if I go back and run the flow again, then it will be successful if there are no other errors on this on any of the other fields. So I'll come back here and I select this option, refresh. It has started like the process of refreshing, and soon I'll be able to see it in the next refresh column. One more thing, if let's say you have created your data flow and later you want to change the refresh settings of it, or if you want to update any of the column details or like, make any changes to your data, we have this edit option here and it will open the same transform data, add columns, all those options in the backend, and we'll be able to edit the queries and everything. So it's like the same window we have when we first started building this data flow. So even if I want to, make add a new column or make any changes, I'll be able to do that from this window. The other option we have here is like for renaming this data flow. And if I don't want to go through the whole process of, transform data and then updating the queries and mapping the fields, if I want to directly edit the refresh settings, I can do it from here, edit refresh settings, and it will open that window for me where I can select refresh manually or refresh automatically. So these level of changes we can even do at any later point of time. And now I can see that my last refresh is successful, which was at just like 1 minute ago. And if I go to show a refresh history, and if I download this file now, I can see that, okay, this is the entity name and the status is success. So now let's go and go back to my entity here, data flows, and I'll go to assessment details. And if I go back to data here, so since we passed the subject value column in the name column while configuring our data flow, here I am seeing these subjects inside the name column. But if I switch back to custom fields, I can see what all fields are there and what data is being like copied for each of those. And in here, I can see that the subject is now linked to my option set. So it has selected which subject we were targeting for, and for these students it has linked it for a lookup field. If I open this tab here, so yeah, here it opened me the student record. If I close these 2 tabs here and open this one again, so this is how you can link a lookup entity by creating a key for it, and for the choices column it will be the unique identifier. So this is how you can configure your data flow and copy data between your source and the sync data source. One last thing I have for today's demo is for let's say if you have created a data flow in one environment, which may be available for development, and you want to transfer that data flow to a different environment, which could be a test environment or production environment. In that case, what you can do is you can club this data flow inside of a solution and then export it as a managed or unmanaged solutions. So the option for doing that is using this add existing. I can select data flows from here. It has this option for from solutions or outside solutions. So I created this other data flow before our demo today, just in case we want to, so because I wanted to keep a backup. So this is inside a solution, but for the flow we just created, it is outside the solution. And if I want to, add it to an existing solution or something, I can select this option as outside solutions and select this data flow and add. So in here, it will just club this data flow as an item, and we can export it like we do it for any other solution. And this way it will be, migrated to a different environment. And while importing it into a different environment, you may want to create this connection first, because that's how it will be authenticated to the SharePoint list. But that can be done while you're, importing this data or this solution into a different environment. So in here, it will add this solution as a component. If it's taking too much time, maybe I'll show a solution where I already have it added. So this is like another solution I have in place. Yeah, so here this is a different solution I have, and it has this my data flow uh, as part of it. And if I want, I can export the whole solution as is. Publish and then export. So it's just like any other export. So finally, on my screen, I have my QR code for LinkedIn profile. If you guys want to connect with me there. So,
I have already added your information on the chat, so I think that should help. So thank you so much, Ritika, for the insightful session.
thank you so much, Yash. All right, that's
Next,
it from my side. I'll stop sharing my screen.
thank you again.